we're going to dive in on a message that kind of goes into we're also going to do a church business meeting today, which you can all be a part of. But this talks to us, and it talks to us as a church, the power of steadfast trust. And I use this image because it's the image, obviously, of who? David and Goliath. Wrong. It's Phil and Jake. No, I'm joking. No, it's David and Goliath. And David and Goliath is a profound story. You can pull so many stories out of that one time of David wanting to get ahead in life. But don't bump. Okay, you'll get that one later. It's early. I get it. It was a horribly dad joke there. But we can pull a lot of truths from that, but I want to look at it specifically that we all face moments of challenge in our faith, okay? No matter where we're at in our Christian walk, no matter where we're going in our Christian walk, we face these moments. And when circumstances shout impossibility, when dreams seem out of reach or family and health seem broken beyond repair, we are called to remain steadfast. We are called to remain people of hope. And it is in these moments that doubt can creep in. David probably had moments of doubt. All throughout Scripture, people that God used had moments of doubt. All right. But God's word calls us to something greater, a never doubt mindset that trusts in his mighty power far beyond our present difficulties. And again, with a group this size, somebody probably had a difficulty this week. It's a safe assumption. Somebody watching this week probably had a difficult situation. But as Christians, we're called to remain steadfast, to remain people of not always doubting, but to remain faithful to what God is, because he's always faithful to us. So I want to share 4 points as it points to us as individuals and as a church. Because this year, again, we're celebrating 21 years together as a church. All right. And that's a pretty amazing milestone given the way this church started on very rocky starts. For those of you that are new, I am not the founding pastor, believe it or not. I was the youth pastor here for about 1.5 years. And then the pastor that I was serving under ended up, he was a district official with the Assemblies of God and went through some turmoil in his life and was asked to step down by the Assemblies of God district office. And I was asked if I would pastor this church. And so we started this church with 8 people and owing about $170,000 on this building. It's been a ride. It's been quite the journey. And yet God's faithful because we're steadfast and seeing what God has done. But here's the deal. Number one, we all feel doubt. All right. We all go through doubt, but we don't have to stay there. Okay. My dad's famous line, 2 famous lines. Dad, it's a great day out, isn't it? And his answer would be compared to what? I guess the winter blast we had last week. I don't know. And I remember one time I'm like, Dad, it's a beautiful day out. Oh, did you become a weatherman? It's like my dad was just that kind of guy, like, okay, and his other famous line was, I doubt it. He was a very optimistic man, but, we have these moments of doubt. We all feel doubt at times, but we're not called to stay there. Doubt is a natural part of the human experience that we go through. Even great believers have experienced moments of uncertainty. The difference is not whether doubt comes. It will. It will come in our lives. But what we do when doubt knocks at the door of our heart. John chapter 20, verse 25 says, see, the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord, but he said to them, this is Thomas, where we get the famous phrase. It's kind of a lost phrase in today's generation, but oh, don't be such a doubting Thomas. Thomas says, unless I see the nail marks in his hand and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Of course, this is after the resurrection and Jesus was appearing to his disciples again. In this area, we all feel doubt. We have to learn that God never said we won't face troubling times. And if there was ever a pastor in our lives that said that, my apologies on his or her behalf. Because we will face challenging times. Discouraging reports, Financial hardships, we face them. And what he commands is that we don't dwell or remain in doubt about his power. Now, we certainly don't become like the kid that puts his fingers in his ears like, I don't hear you, that sort of thing. We face it. It's reality. This is what we're going through. We acknowledge it. But you know what? We go through it. Winston Churchill, known for a lot of great phrases in life. There's one phrase that stands out to me every time that hits me when I'm going through a difficult time. He said this: if you're going through hell, keep going. In other words, press on, go through it. You're going to go through valleys in life. If we think we're ever going to hit the mountaintop to mountaintop and just skip across every mountaintop, wrong answer. Reread the Bible. There will be moments of hardship, but we have to focus on God's ability, certainly not on our own ability. Because I know for Bob, when I focus on my own ability, it gets a little murky, gets a little sticky. You ever go swimming in Spencer Lake? Looks beautiful, but then you're walking out, spring hits you, whoo, that's chilly, okay? You walk in the sand a little bit, and all of a sudden, for me, I'm up to my knees in muck. For Val, it's over her head, okay? We have these moments where all of a sudden, I'm stuck, and you're like drudging out to get out of there and everything. But the fact is, we have to focus on God's ability, not our own ability to get out of things. Human limitation often fuels doubt. We look at situations from our perspective, our own eyes, or the human lens, and see no way out. But God says, never doubt his power to open doors you cannot open, because there are doors that we just cannot open unless God does it. Heal despite the diagnosis. He brings a healing and redirects what seems lost. It's only God that can do these things. There are places that you and I have been in life that we can look at and say, that had to have been God, because there's no way that would have happened otherwise. There's things that we see in our own lives. We just went through Valentine's Day, and I realized that when I look at my wife, I'm like, that had to be God, or she was blind at the moment. Because you know what? That was something God orchestrated. There's no way a kid from inner city Milwaukee met up with a girl from Nakusa in inner city Milwaukee. That was a God thing. Because Tracy and I have determined this. If we would have known each other in high school or during the youth group days, there would have been zero attraction there, because we were two different types of people, okay? And so God does these things. But doubt doesn't disqualify us. Even if your heart trembles, affirm in faith that God is bigger than your problems. When your child wanders off, I'm not talking physically. You know where I'm going with that. Your finances fail, your health declines. Refuse to let doubts settle in your soul. God can turn it all around. Man, when I hit December of this year, this is not a plug for my weight loss. It's a testimony. When I hit December of this year, I looked at myself in the mirror. Mental picture, all right? And I looked at myself and I said, okay, Bob, you're 51 years old. You are on 100 milligrams of losartan, blood pressure medication. Every night you go to bed, your ankles are swelled up, and you can't keep up with Noah. Time to do something. And just like I've said before, I have a very addictive personality. If I find something I'm going to do, I'm doing it. And that morning I woke up and I told Tracy, I think I'm going to jump on this program. And she knows when I'm determined to do something, she's like, stand back, let's go. Let's do it, because I go all in. If it's a hobby or whatever it is. And I know that at that point, a lot of people would say, well, why right before Christmas? That's your biggest time of temptation. That's your biggest time to eat the snickerdoodles, okay? It's because that's how my mind works. I'm going all in at a tough moment. And so that took place, and I realized that was a God thing. I didn't doubt myself. It was just that morning, God put in your head, time to lose some weight. Let's get rolling. And when I go all in, I go all in. And you have stories like that as well. It's like the man at the pool of Bethesda, paralyzed for 38 years, who doubted no one could help him get in. but God's promise that his power can overcome what stagnates us. And he wants us to step into faith rather than stay stuck in doubt. And so we look at point number 2, looking only at our limitations. Radiant Fellowship has always been a church of being smaller, and that's okay. That's fine. There's no definition of how big a church should be. There's big churches, there's small churches, there's home churches. But if we step back and looked at our limitations, we would say, we can't host a concert. We can't do an outreach like that. There's only going to be so many kids coming. Well, Pastor Rob, did you see what the other church did for their Easter egg outreach? Yeah, that's great. They're a larger church. But if you look at what we're doing per capita, we're rocking it pretty good because God's shaking us up. So we have to step back as a church and say, quit looking at our limitations. They can do it, we can do it. It's not a big deal. And we looked at that from the very beginning. Stood right out front on the steps of the church with the Chamber of Commerce after I became the pastor, and we said, let's do a ribbon cutting ceremony. We're restarting this church. And the chamber came over, Terry Schultz with the big scissors, and we stood out there, and she cut the ribbon, and we were excited, and we're moving forward, and we're doing this thing. And we were determined that God was going to do some awesome things here. And we have seen God do awesome things. And as it goes in the life of absolutely every church, we grew, we shrunk. We grew, it's like an accordion, we shrunk, okay? Happens at all the churches. Sometimes you feel a little more in a smaller church. But that's the life cycle when you're around for 21 years. This is how it goes. We had the Nichols family. They used to sit right over in the back. That was the first time I ever had to call the ambulance during service because Pat was sitting there next to her husband, and all of a sudden I just noticed, boom, fell over. Luckily, she was safe. But they aged and they passed away, and there's good memories there. We had Dick and Joe Walker. Dick would play the piano every Wednesday morning down at the Chez Marché, where the Little Fat Gretchens used to be, a French restaurant. And he'd play, and he'd come in every Sunday, and he would say, Bob, he would talk about music because that was what he loved. Joe would always, his wife would always talk about the hymns she loved. But Dick would come in, he grew up in Chicago, and if you said Chicago wrong, he would correct you on the spot. But we would talk music. He would say, some of my biggest dilemmas growing up in Chicago was when I would walk down the street and I would see the two venues, and he would say, I don't know, do I see the Glenn Miller Orchestra or Count Basie Orchestra? I'm like, that's a pretty awesome dilemma, okay? Because that's how old he was. They passed away. So we saw a lot of people come and go in this church, and yet here we are moving forward and doing some great things that God's put out for us to do. But our impossibility is really God's setup. Every setback is God's opportunity to show up when we feel inadequate or overwhelmed, shift focus from what we can do to what God's mighty hand can accomplish through us. He's called us to do things in life. He's called this church to do something in life, to make a difference. As I threw that out a couple weeks ago, every church should ask themselves that question. If we close the doors today, would anyone be upset? I got to believe for Little Radiant Fellowship, some people would be kind of upset because of the things we do in our community and the way we love people. Just this week, I got a very sensitive call asking if we would come alongside somebody and start helping them out. We've had profound business leaders in this city walk through these doors to get spiritual help, to call because they may be a part of something else, but they just can't let their guard down in their house of worship, so they seek guidance here. These are stories I cannot share with you by name. But how God uses this church is an amazing thing in our community. So we have to stop counting our limitations. We don't have a big budget. Look at the size of our sanctuary. People freak out when they hear that we host the concerts that we do. When Disciple came, they're like, Only sits 100 people. I'm like, that's all you need in Wapaka. I promise you, you're not going to ever have a Christian concert here with thousands of people. It's just not going to happen. And they come in, all those bands back there. We've hosted over 45 bands here. And everyone that comes in says, this was like the coolest venue to play. I'm like, yeah, even if you're a big name, it takes you back to your roots. Sometimes you need that, Mr. Ego. Okay. And, but also it's just a cool venue. It's acoustically tight. Okay. Good sound system, all of that. And ministry happens. So we see Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. We've seen a lot of kids in this church come and go, age out. The kid that's working the window, now not 20-something-year-old that's working the window at Dairy Queen, you know what? The fact is he was a little kid in our Royal Ranger program that has grown up now and moved on. One of the bank tellers at Premier, he was a kid in our Royal Ranger program. And these kids always remember that. But we have a lot of kids that have come and gone. And I can say for this group right now, I was at a birthday party yesterday with the Netzel family. Every one of you parents are rocking it. You're raising some awesome kids. When the parents come to pick their kids up on Wednesday nights, I do my best to say, you are raising amazing kids. Because they are. Kudos to all of our parents in this room that have had kids that I've got to see grow up in here. Even little Allie, who would, when we go out to Culver's, steal stuff off our plate. I think you were like 4 or 5 when you guys started coming here. 2? Okay. Yeah. And so it's amazing to see all of this happen. But we have to, as a church and as an individual people, be a never doubt person. Faith over fear. Again, it's not to be ignorant of doubt or oblivious to doubt, but to say it, call a spade. Say it is what it is. I'm doubting right now. But look back and see. Like David facing Goliath, David was a young shepherd facing a giant with no armor, no experience, and just a sling. Yet his confidence was in the living God whose power was greater than the enemy's size or weapons. I've been watching some reels. Somehow I got caught up into this company called Sling something, and they actually sell actual slings that they show you how to use and everything. And I see these guys professionally using these. I might get one for the campground at some point. So my apologies if you get a dent in the new camper, but no, I'll shoot it in the woods. But the thing, it's just a simple, they showed how, we see the movies, where Dave is just swinging the thing. It's literally, you throw back, whip around, and it lets off such a crack, like a bullwhip. When you let it go, the guy blows a limb right off a tree, a dead tree that's hanging. And I'm like, it's no wonder David had pinpoint accuracy, because it's basically throwing, where you throw, that thing's going at a very fast speed. And David took this giant down. But in 1 Samuel 17:33, Saul said, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. Here's a word to the wise. Tune out the Sauls in your life. Tune out the Sauls that may speak against this church. For the first couple of years, I had so many job offers to get out of this place. Everywhere from Olathe, Kansas, to Marshfield, to Germantown, to even, what was the city? Abbotsford, in different areas like that. I'm like, no, God's called me here. I don't doubt that one single bit. Tracy and I are good. We're content here. We love it. But we have to learn to tune out the Sauls in our life. There will always be voices trying to convince you that you're not enough, that your dreams will fail, your health won't improve, or your family won't be restored. Refuse to listen. God is the one who calls and equips us. Just like David facing Goliath, David looked at his skill set. He was a youth, so he kind of lacked common sense, which helps if you're going to take on a 9-foot guy and just say, yeah, I got it. Okay. And he went for it and he conquered. So your faith in God's favor plus your slingshot, your sling, I'm saying that symbolically, is a formula for divine victory. Trust God's power even when your resources seem meager. And then we shift from focus to God's ultimate power. We shift our focus. We quit looking at the guy in the mirror. If Bob's going to do this, I can't always look at the guy in the mirror. God has equipped me. He's given me the gifts and talents. He's given you the gifts and talents to do what you need to do in life. Look at where you're at in your careers, in your jobs, wherever you are. God's equipped you to do that. But when he starts stretching you a little bit, there comes that moment. But you know what? Shift your focus from internal to God and say, all right, if this is what you want, this is where you want me to go, this is what you want me to do, recognize God is going to say, I'm shifting you. I'm going to stretch you a little bit here. But this is what I've called you to do. When the school superintendent called me that first time and said, I'd like you to consider running for school board, I'm like, okay. I do everything in my power to stop from laughing. But I said, okay, I'll think about it and everything. I hung up. I'm like, what in the world was that about? Okay. A kid with a 0.07 GPA his freshman year? Come on school board? That's laughable. I don't care who you are. That's funny right there. All right. But I'm like, God, if this is what you want, we'll go for it. Because God improved me over my school career. And there it was. You have those same stories. You see where yourself is at right now, and you're like, God had to have done that, because you know what? That would not be me on my own power. So we have to shift our focus to God's unlimited power. You are not bound by natural laws. You didn't do this, you didn't do that, so there's no way you could do this. You ever ridden in a funeral procession? There's a little sense of power with that, okay? What do I mean? The officer or the hearse is leading you, and laws don't apply to you at that point. Right through the red lights, right through everything, you know? That's how it is with God. When you have the one that set the law in motion riding with you, natural laws don't apply to you. I've got to believe that sometimes people that knew us from our past look at where you are now, and they're like, no way should that have been the turnout. No way should that have should you have turned out that way. That's because natural laws don't apply. God takes you and says, nope, we're doing this. We're moving you forward. You're going to do something awesome with your life. Moses' mistake, Moses doubted the provision of quail in the desert because he looked at the limitations. In Exodus 16, the people were sick of manna. Literally translated, what is this? I had some of those dishes from my mom, but what is this? And the people started complaining, and he doubted. But you know what? God shifted those winds and said, okay, you want quail? You're going to complain about it. Here comes the quail. And they had so much quail because of God's provision. But they doubted, would this even happen? So God's question to Moses remains, when did I become weak? When did I become weak that you would doubt me in this situation? God takes us from a place of doubt to a place that we have never been before. And the best thing is, at 51, at 20s, at 30s, at 40s, 50s, 60s, he keeps us moving along. Those of us that are moving up in years, you got to be careful. That's when God really used a lot of people. Just saying. But we always see God doing amazing things. So doubt is going to come knocking. But we don't have to invite it in. You don't. I realize that the sake of sounding super spiritual or a little out there, if you let doubt creep in and you start speaking out saying, yeah, I don't have the ability to do that. I don't have the know-how to do that. Man, be careful. You could speak things into life really quick. You tell somebody something long enough, they're going to start believing it. Rather than just say, no, I think I could go for it. That job promotion, that job posting that they just listed internally, I think I could go for it. It says bachelor's degree or life experience. You got street cred. You got a lot of life experience. God didn't make you draw your attention to that post and get a little excited about it without knowing that you might have it in you to pursue that. So you run your resume, start putting that together. I don't know how to make a resume. You really don't need to in a ChatGPT world, okay? You just fill in the blanks and professional, you know. You have all of these things. You just need to hone in on personal skills and stuff. And then you say, God, give me the know-how to do these things. As a church, we look at what we're doing. We say, I don't doubt where God's taken us. God continues to use us in an awesome way, and we're excited about what's happening in the future. But God will do what he wants to do in your life. And you know what? Looking back at the story of David, giants are going to fall in your life. Impossible circumstances can turn around. God's mighty power is alive and at work in you. And it's at work in this church. I bet you if we even shared stories, that's something that seemed too impossible in your own life. Shouldn't have happened, but it did. We'd be encouraged by that. Some of you got to experience that in our own church with, again, I'm just giving testimony to Tracy and I. We were literally told, you will not have kids. You just won't. James and Emma, we had the blessing of adopting them. James at 9 months old, Emma 4 months later from the hospital. But I was told, due to me, we weren't going to be able to have kids anymore, or we weren't going to have kids at all. Fast forward a couple of years, here comes Noah, our own biological child. It was told that we weren't going to do that. And look what God did. It was told to us early on, this church probably won't make it. Not by Joe Schmo that came through the door, but by district officials and stuff saying you might want to prepare for shutting it down gracefully. Ain't happening. You're talking to Bob, number one. I'm crazy enough to actually try it. Why? Because God's given me that tenacity. God's given you abilities as well. And so we need to walk forward in faith. Amen.